All right, welcome back, everyone. You see, my setup has changed a little bit. Not only am I in Mexico City, but I've upgraded. I actually have someone here doing all the good stuff and the editing. So, shout out to Ricardo. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're here to kind of have a conclusion to the story, more or less, right? So, hopefully, you've read or watched the videos for part one and part two, and you know all of the nitty gritty of where we came from. So, now we're at the point where the layoff actually happens. This is like what we've been leading up to. So I'll just get right into it. So 2 15-minute meetings like showed up on people's calendars. And the reason that we knew that this was happening is because we had that internal group that I mentioned. And so I got the 15-minute meeting where we were being fired. And some others got the 15-minute meeting where they were like, you know, the golden children, they got to be saved, whatever. But I will say that 15-minute Zoom meeting was like the most awkward, strange thing I've ever been in. Like, I haven't been in that many layoffs, but I would not imagine you bringing like 17 people into a Zoom on like, I think it was a Tuesday morning, because we figured this would either happen on a Friday or a Monday. Maybe it was a Monday, I don't remember. But like, we get in at like 10 o'clock, you see these meetings happening. 17 people show up. The founders are there. And then they just start to go into like, well, you know, the war in Ukraine. And we're like, wait, this is it. This is actually it again, because we knew this was coming. And they just kind of go on about, I don't even remember the things, but I recorded it because like as soon as I knew this was a thing, I was like, I'm just gonna keep this as a memento, let's call it that. But realistically, it's like you just need to have a copy of some of these things. Actually, you'll find out if you read the blog a little bit later is important, right? So what made it even more weird than the fact that there was just a bunch of people and they were talking about why they were having to pivot or something, was the fact that they clearly didn't think about this at all, like the impact that this would have to people. Because I think at first people had the ability to write in like the chat, and some people were trying to ask questions, and then eventually they disabled the chat altogether. And then they disabled people's ability to unmute. And you could kind of see on Billy's face that she was just like, I cannot believe this is happening. And you're kind of like, sis, you're laying off people and you don't expect them to ask questions or be upset. Like, who's the adult in this room? Because it seemed like none of y'all thought this through. So anyway, there's like 10, 11 minutes maybe of Rob speaking. And HR person, head of HR wasn't even there, but he has like the nerve to say something to the effect of like, well, the HR person, who I called Stacy in this, she is also getting laid off, and she'll reach out to you. So like, be like Stacy, be strong. And it was kind of like, you, because you're not the one getting laid off here. You're not the one who has to think about how you're gonna pay your bills, you know, any of those types of things. But it was just strange of like, why have it at this point of the day ask us or tell us that we are still employed for 2 more days? Like, it was just, all of it was strange. It was just like, why? Like, none of it had to happen in this way, you know? Nevertheless, eventually Rob stops talking about whatever he's saying at that point, and they just abruptly end the call. Like, people don't have the opportunity to ask questions. They don't have the opportunity to speak their mind. And at one point, one of the folks that was getting laid off alongside me, they were like yelling into the camera. Like, if you can imagine someone, like, it seemed to be like screaming at the top of their lungs to be heard. And they were like, none of the founders acknowledged them at all. And I was just kind of like, that's just, on top of what you're doing, this just feels inhuman not to acknowledge that this person is clearly upset and wants to say some words, and you're not giving them the opportunity to do so. Anywho, so they abruptly end this, and then we kind of just like fall back, and we're kind of like, damn, okay, it happened. Now what? And so I think a lot of us went into Slack. Either if they hadn't already captured some data and evidence and all the things that they needed to do, they went into just converse on Slack about the fact that they were laid off and da-da-da. And then one person who actually wasn't laid off, but they were in the group with us. I don't know, maybe this was maybe 45 minutes later, they ended up putting a post in Slack saying how reprehensible this entire layoff and how this came about, how it all was. And then someone, we can't say who, because I am not a Slack admin, but someone deleted it in less than 5 minutes. But I think we got screenshots of it. Nevertheless, it was kind of all hell broke loose at that point, right? And the funny thing is that clearly I was part of the layoff crew, but the people that stayed were the associate PM who was underneath me, who I enjoyed working with. She stayed, but also the new golden child. She was also kept around, even though she was clearly underperforming. So it was very clear to me, at least when you saw the people that were laid off, all of us had not all of the people laid off, but the people who had baking experience were a part of the layoff crew, myself, a product designer, as well as a compliance person. And I was like, so then how are you make it make sense. How are you going to have a bank if you don't actually have people who know how to bank? Because none of the founders had banking experience, right? I think Billy was a pop star or some shit like that. And Rob talked about how he, was a strategic something and did the things and blah, blah, blah. But no one can really have a clear line of sight to his actual career. It seems like he bounced around a lot and there's no sense of expertise, but each their own. He convinced a bunch of people to, feed into their guilt and give him money. So whatever. So they let us go back to work for maybe an hour or two. But after the person who made the Slack message, after they had done that, they essentially shut us down, which was yeah, quite frankly. It's why would you fire people and then just let them run amok? It's not like anyone had desire to do anything nefarious by any means. But it's just kind of, this is also a bank. Recognize that if somebody wanted to do some shitty, they had all the opportunity to do some shitty. So we're now locked out of Slack, again, as we should be. And I think that was the last day I turned on that computer for maybe a good year, quite frankly. So as we're kind of waiting around for Stacy, the head of HR, to follow up with details on what happens next, the severance, all the things. I filed unemployment because you can do that for Illinois. So I filed for it immediately. And I was scared if for a good, 24 to 48 hours. Cause even though I knew it was coming, when it actually happens, it's still a gut punch, because you're legitimately thinking how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to eat, pay all these bills and da-da-da. And this was the very, very beginning of the entire tech organization industry in general kind of imploding. Legitimately tech startups were closing left, right, and center, particularly banks. A lot of tech organizations were just shuttering 50, 60 people at a time, 20, 30% of their entire org. But it was clear that they at least thought these things through, because as you saw a lot of this stuff become publicized, there was a lot of care when going into the severance packages. There's seems to be a minimum of 3 months, some upwards to 6 months of severance, which was really nice. And so that's what I was expecting, was at least, 3 months of severance, given the fact that we were you're essentially kicking us out the door into this space where it's going to be hard for a lot of us to get jobs, right? And think about the population. Daylight was full of queer people. So for them to find an organization, particularly for our trans and binary and non-binary folks, that they felt comfortable with, it wasn't going to be like this, you know what I mean? And they should know that more than anything. But nevertheless, we finally get the email from Stacy, and it's like, and I didn't remember this quite frankly until I looked back at the email, but it was 4 weeks of severance. And I was kind of like, that's it? Like that's all, that's really it? Because it's going to take a lot of people a lot more time to find a job. So then the group of us got together, the same group, and we talked about essentially trying to do collective bargaining more or less. We kind of called ourselves a collective, and we like drafted communications together, and we sent it back to Stacy, and she more or less refused to communicate with us as a group. And I don't know if that was, it's HR rules, it's legal rules. Like I can understand her pushback in doing so. But like, regardless, every time she responded to me individually, like we would still respond back as a collective. So it was like, you can try not to do this, but we still gonna do it anyway. So, but we essentially asked for 3 months severance and 6 months insurance, I believe, because as you can imagine, I don't know if everyone's on therapy. I had therapy, and that was also like one of the first things that I thought about was like, how am I gonna pay for therapy? And then some people wanted to keep their laptops because that was the only laptop that they had available, right? And as again, they're jumping into this whole interview world, and you can't be filling out applications and taking interviews on your phone like you needed a laptop, So that was kind of the 3 things that we all just kind of went back with. And I will try and like show like the screenshot of like the response, which was like essentially, nah. It was like straight up, nah. And I think what Stacey's response was like, this was the best that we could do. And we fought hard for you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, y'all forget that, again, this is June that this happened. This is Pride Month, which is also fucking ironic. Like how is a queer organization lay off half of your queer and trans and non-binary folks, mostly people of color, during Pride Month? Like anyone? Like branding, PR person, like somebody should have told them this is probably not a good idea. So Stacy essentially says, nah, this is the best you can do. But I had been there since the end of January. And so I knew that they had just raised $15 million. And from February, when they talked about raising $15 million to June, that's what, 4 months? How you, again, make the math, make it make sense. Like, honestly, how do you go through $15 million in 4 months? So I know they were bold-faced fucking lying. Like, you just can't tell me that you didn't have more money to give to people. You just didn't want to. Like, you just didn't want to. And just say, nah, I don't want to. And at least be like, all right, well, shit, we can't force you. But like, to be like, this is all we could do, and this is all we got left. And it's like, unless some y'all with access to the bank accounts, I'm not saying who, stole money that you shouldn't have you shouldn't have used, you had a shit ton of money left. Because I know you were underpaying a bunch of people. And again, it's only been 4 months. You couldn't have gone through 15 million. Nevertheless, and the reason why you're like, how can you know that for sure? Because I had just come from an organization that had also raised 15 million. And it took them at least, I want to say 18 months to go through that money. And they had a much bigger team. Daylight was a lot leaner. I think they had 20-something folks to begin with. I think the place I had come from had like 30-something folks. They had spent a bunch of money on marketing. They had spent a bunch of money on like influencers. And it's like, so just comparison, I know they had some money in the bank, right? That was just my gut feeling. Anyway, so the response was like, nah, we're not even gonna try not even a little bit in good faith. But then where it starts to get like crazy is that you can see in the timestamp, I think they sent it on like the 16th at like 11. And they're like, if you don't accept this by the next day at 9 a.m., it's off the table. And I'm just like, I feel like this is illegal. I feel like you can't give someone less than 24 hours to take this type of severance. Like, and so that's when we started to look for a lawyer, right? I think some people reached out individually to be like, this is unfair. This doesn't give enough time to get legal review. And so they gave us 5 business days. But like, they really thought that like it was okay to use these scare tactics. And that's when I lost all respect for them altogether. Because again, it's one thing to be all about business and you're like, no, we don't want to give you this extra money, blah, blah, blah. But again, remember in part 1, where they gave the chief of staff person that they fired 6 weeks of severance for working less than a week. So don't tell me you can't get this approved. Particularly when like 99% of the people of color and trans folks are the ones that's being fired. Like the only other person of color that didn't get fired, Tracy, was because Tracy was like BFFs with Paul. And again, this is my opinion on it, because Rob more or less told me that like, I think it sounds like I should just fire you and Tracy together and start fresh. And I was like, okay. But we all knew Tracy was off limits. It was, yeah. And anywho, so that's when we started digging into finding lawyers. And this is like the hard part for me, because like I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any friends who were lawyers. I didn't know where to go. I had looked at a lawyer from a previous organization when I had got laid off, or my role was eliminated. That's a whole other story. From a previous organization, but that seemed a lot different. And daylight being in New York, it felt like we had to get a New York lawyer and blah, blah, blah. So long story short, we talked to one person, one lawyer, an old white guy, and he seemed to be like, I don't understand what this is, what you all are. It was kind of like, he was clearly not about this life. And I think he wanted a retainer to even like look at information or respond or anything like that. And we were like, nah, sorry. And then a friend of a friend of a friend, I think, make a recommendation. And so then we ended up calling up that lawyer. We finally got them on the phone and we were finally able to talk to them. Some of us were able to talk to them, and because of like just the time frame that we had available, like we just ended up going with them. Not only because like they seemed interested in the case, but also because they were going to accept being on contingent basis, which essentially just meant that we didn't have to pay up front, that they would take a portion of whatever severance or whatever the case like yielded if we ended up going to court or whatever, things like that. So by this point, the number of folks in the collective started to dwindle. I think that people did like their individual research about like what their states would allow and things of that nature. And so at the end of the day, it just ended up being 3 of us. And again, I said this in the blog, I said this many times before. There's no ill will to anyone who had to accept the funds, because I get it. You were between a rock and a hard place. It was like you need the money to survive for the foreseeable future versus standing up for yourself and advocating for what you believe in. And like, those are 2 hard things to be able to choose between. And it was an either or, like, unfortunately it couldn't be both. Right. And I was just at that position where I was like, it. I wasn't able to stand up for myself before, but like now I am. And so after like those first 2 days of me being scared, there was like this weird, like, Zen calm that came over me. And I was just like, I'm gonna fight it. And I'm a fighter for all the people who can't do it themselves right now. And that was it. I did get a PTO payout because it was really clear in Illinois state rules that like, if you accrue any type of PTO, it has to be paid out within like 5 business days or something like that, or termination. So I did get essentially 2 weeks payments, more or less right away. And so that held me over until like I secured some contract jobs. I started interviewing right away, all the types of things. Because again, like, we knew this was coming. So I was already kind of in prep mode, had updated my resume, already started to like reach out to places and people. So I wasn't starting from behind, but you know, So yeah, so then three of us kind of formed like the final collective, and we moved forward with things. And that was, I want to say, like the end of June of 2022. And that was like the very beginning of this really, really long process, this journey. I can only imagine what, Rob, Billy, they were all feeling at that point. Because I'm pretty sure that they thought that like they would bully us all into taking it. So the fact that there was three of us who were like, fuck y'all and your mama, we gonna do this. I'm sure at first they're like, oh, this is gonna fizzle and nothing's gonna come of it. But then I feel like over time they probably realized that like, oh shit, we should have just paid them motherfucking money. They should have just paid us their motherfucking money, quite frankly. Anyway, okay, so we secured the lawyer, moved things forward, kind of in tandem. We happened to get into the eyes or on the books of reporter Jen from the New York Mag. And so each of us in the collective ended up like having conversations with Jen. I forget where I was when I had my conversation with Jen. But we shared our stories. We shared all the things. I shared everything that I've talked to you about, everything that you clearly read in an article yourself. And she was on board. And slowly but surely over the span of, I don't know, maybe July when things started to like pop off with that, to March when the article actually came out. Because like first it was supposed to come out in like October, and then it was supposed to come out in December, and then it's supposed to which was really interesting because in October of 2022, I went to Money 2020, which is the big fintech conference in Las Vegas. And I was like, oh shit, what if I run into Billy? Or what if I run into Paul? Or what if I run into Rob? Like, it's going to be, I was like, but it would also be amazing if like the article launched that day. Because like, then he wouldn't be able to ignore it, right? Because it was like a big fintech conference, and it did not happen. It did not come out until March of 2023. And so more or less kind of moved on with our life to a certain extent. I secured a full-time job, and I started in August of 2022. But right before then, the end of August of 2022 is when I had the most explicit and undeniable form of retaliation like I've ever seen. Because remind you, like when we got that email from, almost saying her real name. When we got that email from Stacy in July, the layoff, she was really, really clear that like we are laid off, we can file for unemployment, all the things. So surprise, when I get an email from the unemployment office, the government, that says, oh, by the way, people are challenging your unemployment so that you quit. And I was like, you gotta be f***ing kidding me. Like, one, like, are you stupid or are you stupid? Because like, we've already engaged a lawyer at this point, right? You have the written and video proof that you laid my ass off, but you wanna go to the government and like lie on paper? Like, again, make it make sense. I would have so much more respect for all the people involved, like if the shit made sense, but like the shit didn't make sense. It just didn't. Like, why would you why would you think that like I would be like, okay, that's fine. I'm already suing your ass. Why don't you think that like you retaliating against me is only gonna up the ante, make that shit more personal? Because before it was all business, it was the fact that you had done these things. I thought that were unjust, and I wanted justice, right? I wanted to be able to collect some money to give to the folks because you chose not to. Simple as that. I was not upset that we got laid off. I was only upset that you didn't give people the due that they had earned and that they deserve from what they put into the company. That was it. But now you made this shit personal. Now you call my mama a bitch. Now you came after my money and potentially trying to do some shit that like could really negatively impact me in some type of way. Again, lying to the government and saying that I was a motherfucking liar. And so I had to clear it up real quick and call, I forget how many times I called the unemployment office, but I made sure real quickly that it was clear that I did not lie. I had written and verbal proof that you were lying, that the company was lying and all of that. But again, at that time, I didn't need the unemployment. So like that made this a little bit easier, but I needed to make sure that they knew that I was telling the truth in the situation, because I didn't need this to come up in 6, 7, 8 years and then them trying to, audit me or put me in jail or some shit like that. But that's when, like I said, it became hella personal. And then I was on a mission. I was like, I'm about to get everything I can get from you, or I'm about to make shit public as hell. And that's why I'm here today. Okay, so August happens, all this stuff happens. We share a bunch of evidence with the lawyer. They're putting together the complaints again. And so the whole thing about like the article was that we were waiting to launch the complaint until the article happened, because if I remember correctly, as soon as we did the complaint, then it was like public record, so that anything that went into the article could not be like, they couldn't sue us for libel or defamation or anything like that, because it's public record at that point. As soon as but we didn't want to give Daylight or anyone the heads up of all the evidence that was coming their way. And so if you're interested, you should read the complaint because it's still public record. You just need to look it up. I think it's actually just like look up Canty versus Daylight or Canty versus Rob Curtis, and you'll find it. So the article comes out March 2023. And y'all, I remember being in an Uber. I don't know if I was going to the airport or coming back from the airport. I probably had to look at my schedule to see like where in the world I was at that time. But I remember being like, oh my God, it's live. Oh my God, it's live. And so I'm reading it and I'm kind of just like numb. Like if you can imagine, like we've been working up to this for more than 6 months. And we haven't seen a draft. We had no idea what was going to happen, but it finally happened. And I'm reading it and I'm kind of like, on one hand, I'm like in disbelief that like it actually happened. Like the article happened, but also like reading what she wrote was like, damn, I almost didn't even recognize all the elements that went into this. And mind you, the article had like, if I'm not mistaken, some upwards of 20 people talk to her. That's essentially the whole motherfucking company, except maybe like the founders and like 3 other people that didn't talk to her. So like the number alone should tell you how bad the situation is, that 20 plus people chose to speak to a reporter about the hostile, toxic, abusive environment that they all, not just me, all felt that they endured during their time at Daylight, right? So on one hand, I was in disbelief because that was the first time I had learned about people writing like, domestic abuse survivor and like name tag. And I was just like, what? Seriously? Like, who thought these things were okay to do? And then on the other hand, I was also kind of just like, but you left out so much stuff. Like there was just so much stuff but I understand, right? Jen had to do her job and make sure, I'm assuming that she had to make sure like things were corroborated by more than one person, right? It couldn't just be he said, she said. And certain things were just my experience of talking directly to Rob and things he said on the slide, all those types of things that, I talked to my therapist about, but there was no other person in that room. So I get why she positioned it the way that she did. And so it was a surreal experience, to be honest with you. It was a super surreal experience. And even though the 3 of us in the collective knew that we were putting a target on our back, right? I've talked about this before of how like, we're the only ones named. This is going to follow us for the rest of our lives. But I felt like it was worth it in the end if I could get these things for these people, if I can get some money for these people that I feel like they deserved it. And so even though things didn't turn out that way, but I will get to that eventually, we move forward. And I think at that point, it sounds like at that point, because we still had people who were intimately aware of what was going on inside Daylight at the time, like they were freaking the fuck out. So like right before the article, because of course Jen had to do her due diligence, reach out to Rob for any responses or whatever. And I think in the article he even says like some narcissistic bullshit of like, people look at me as a father and I'm sorry that they feel this way. I don't know why I put that voice. That's not his voice. But it was still stupid. You could see that he didn't want to acknowledge or take responsibility for anything. And then and the funny thing is that you're the CEO. You are responsible for everything that happens under your purview in the company, whether you did it, whether you didn't do it, whether you did it intentionally, whether you didn't do it, whatever, you take responsibility. And the fact that even at that point, he could not take responsibility, like just shows you who his character is at the end of the day. I digress. So we move forward, and then some things start to happen between the lawyers, right? They had, I kind of call them a lawyer in a box. I feel like they were part of a startup package from Eastern Europe. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, at first they were there, and then when the article came out, then they got rid of those lawyers. They got 2 Black women, and I felt like, and listen, I can't say why they got 2 Black women, but it sounded like they got 2 Black women to be like, we're not racist, all that bullshit again. And then the 2 women were like, offered me, because again, I can't speak to everyone in the collective, but they had offered me $50K. And at the time, both me and the lawyer were like, fuck that. Fuck that. Like, you could have offered that in the beginning. Like, that would have been the 3 months. That would have been the 3 months. And we would have been done, and we wouldn't have to do this. And I didn't have to go through all this bullshit. But now that you made me go through all this fucking bullshit, now there's more. Now I need you to pay more. Because you're going to want, with that payment, you're going to want me to be silent. And clearly, not that I like to talk per se, but I have some shit to say. And if you want me to be quiet, it's going to come with a lot of zeros. It's going to come with a lot of zeros, right? I'm not asking for millions, but we did ask for 2 years severance, hoping that we land somewhere around 1 year severance. So, and apparently they were like, Black women were like, this is it. There's nothing else we can get from them. It was hard to even get this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, then that's fine. Then we're just going to go to court and we have all the fucking evidence. If you see the complaint, it's filled with evidence. It has screenshots. It has documents. It has it's just filled with shit that's do you really want to have this televised and publicized? Because all this is going to do is hurt you more than me at the end of the day. Because we're in the rights. We have all the evidence. And then they go away, and then it sounds like there's another lawyer who's a queer lawyer who's doing this pro bono. And one of the people in the collective was like, well, that was fucking dumb. Because they got money, right? They just laid off half their company. They had 15 million. Let's say somebody misappropriated 5 million of that, or whatever. You still got, let's say, 10 million, and you telling me that you can't come out of pocket for a couple $100,000? That's some bullshit. That's some bullshit. At this point, I forget how mediation is brought up, but I'm guessing their newest lawyer, the latest lawyer, brought up going to mediation, and then the mediator pops up. And I meet with the mediator once. It wasn't a Zoom call, it was a phone call. And I had never done mediation before. So I talked to the man, and he's telling me all these things of I talked to the lawyer on both sides, I'm unbiased, I'm just trying to get to a resolution, blah, blah, blah. And even Daylight's lawyer admits that you won. It's pretty clear, what do they say? Cut and dry that you have all this evidence that they lost, right? He's like, but unfortunately, they don't have any more money. And so all they're offering you is 2 weeks severance. And I was, again, at the time, this is a literally damn near a full year later. And my memory was that they had only offered us 2 weeks at the beginning. So I was like, the same 2 weeks that they offered us at the beginning? And he's like, yes, but they bluffed, or they called your bluff and you took their company. And so again, he was trying to say all this stuff to be like, you want at the end of the day, take this little money and like go do something with it, but like you want. He was trying to appeal to my ego, and I was like, bruh, sir, let me be hella clear with you. The only reason I'm not doing this for me. The only reason I'm doing this is to collect money to give to folks because he should have done it in the first place. So 2 weeks ain't gonna help them at all because 30% goes to the fucking lawyer. So 2 weeks salary, and I'll be honest with you, my salary was $200,000. So 2 weeks salary, I was something around $15,000 if I remember. 30% of that goes to the lawyer, so that's like $5,000. So $10,000 off the top. I got to pay taxes on that first before I can give it to anyone. So if I, let's say 40% taxes, then I got $6,000. Okay, like yes, $6,000 will help somebody, but like it's not the thing that's going to help them help them like after being out of the job market for like 6 to 8 months. Like $6,000 is like a drop in the bucket at that point. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So it wasn't until after I got off the call with them, I ended up calling a good friend to tell them about the mediation. And they were like, who interviewed the lawyer? I was like, girl, you're right. Like this man just came out of nowhere. I didn't interview him. No one that I know in our collective interviewed him. So like, where did he come from? And then they were also like, how is he getting paid? And I was like, motherfucker, like, true. How is this man getting paid? Because he ain't doing this out of the kindness of his heart. So then I had to have this exchange with the lawyer to be like, how much, like, where did he come from? How much is his how much is his fee? And I don't remember what he said as far as like where did this man come from. But he said that his fee was $8,000 and that he was foregoing our $4,000 because we had to split the fee for the collective. And I was like, okay, well, like, why would he do that? But okay, sure. Anyway, I think I maybe had one other conversation with him. I wish at that point, like, I had done maybe more research or talked to more people about mediators. I will also say at this point, it was really clear that, like, I feel like our lawyer was definitely preoccupied with other things. It was hard to get in touch with him at times. It was hard to get him to respond to us at times. Like, I'm sure he was over it, particularly when he realized that there wasn't going to be a big payday at the end of the day. And again, this is my perspective. I can't speak on his behalf or any of that type of stuff or anyone else's behalf, but it just felt beat down. I feel like after this entire year of fighting, of getting this article, getting the publicity, all these things that nothing, like we couldn't do it. Like this was it. It was 2 weeks. And I think eventually I was like, I talked to the collective and we were just like, I mean, it just feels like there's nothing else that we can do. Right. So verbally I was like, all right, I guess. And then shit goes silent for like, yeah, so you kind of just felt beat down by that point because it just felt like there was nowhere else to go, right? Like, we've been working on this for a year and you're just telling me over and over again, all I got is 2 weeks. So I verbally said yes, fast forward maybe a couple months and none of this has set right with me. It feels like we're getting played. Because again, like bring it back to like just the dollars and cents of the matter. Like it don't make sense how you've gone through 15 million and all you're telling me that you have is 2 weeks for 3 people. Like it just doesn't make sense at all. It's like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like it, particularly how you can go from 150,000, I'm assuming, to like less than 50,000 for everyone. And I'm just like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Because again, during this time from when they laid us off, they had a couple more layoffs over the span of whatever the year. But let's say from the time from March till June, July, I think is when the company actually closed down. I know for a fact that I had employed at least 3 people outside of I think Paul had left before the article that came out in March. I knew the couple people that were working there at the time. And when I say they were doing nothing, they legitimately were doing nothing. They got paid 40-hour weeks to like maybe do like a 15-minute stand once a week, if that. So like, again, you had the money to pay these people their full ass salaries, but you didn't have the money to actually pay us what you should have paid us, you know, like, okay. So at that point, when like the actual paperwork came down somewhere around, let's say August of this year of 2023, and I read the paperwork, I was like, fuck no, no fucking way. There's like one clause that I call out specifically in the blog, and it was something about like, you agree not to talk about anything related to the complaint or anything that happened. And I was like, no, not for 2 weeks. If you wanted me to shut up, and this shit needs to come up with like a couple more zeros, like there needs to be another comma in this bitch. But for 15 grand, no ma'am, no thank you. And so I told the collective that I wasn't taking it, and I told my lawyer that I wasn't taking it, and he was like, wait, what? And I was like, bruh, I told y'all from the beginning what I wanted was justice, and what I wanted was money for the people that deserved it. You were neither giving me justice nor the money, so why the fuck would I be silent? No, it's just not worth it. And at that point, what was worth and still is worth it to me is to create this as a resource for my community, so that they can understand not just what I went through, but like if they hopefully are inspired to hold their leaders accountable, want to understand what goes into suing, like they are better prepared to enter this type of journey than I was, right? And so we could only get better, because I didn't have any resources. There were no blogs, there were no, not that I could find out of like Black women or Black people suing their employers and like talking about it openly, because essentially once you take a settlement, 99.9% of the time, you're silent. You're not allowed to speak on anything. So I was like, fuck it. This is worth more than like the $3,000 or $2,000 I was going to end up being able to pocket. Like, it's just not worth it to me. And then so I was like, no, fuck y'all. And then the mediator wanted to talk to me again. And this I remember because it happened more recently, but I was at FinTech DevCon, which was early August in Austin. And so I'm in this hotel room, calls me up, and he's like, hey, he's trying to like, shoot the shit with me for a little bit. Like, hey, what's going on, Brittany? It's great to talk to you. He's like, yeah, so your lawyer tells me that you decided not to take the settlement. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because it's really clear that they want to silence my voice. Like, I won't be able to speak about any of this. He's like, yes, you will. Like, he keeps cutting me off, trying to like mansplain to a certain extent of being like, yes, you can. Yes, you will. There's nothing that they can say there's nothing that they can do to silence you. And I was like, there's this one clause that says specifically I can't talk about what was even in the public record now, what was in the complaint that we filed. And he was like, no, they can't say that. And I read it to him. And then he was like, huh? And then I read it again, and he was like, oh, I mean, okay. And then he made me say like 3 more words, and then he got off the call. Because I mean, at that point, it was like, I did my due, like I read the thing, bruh. I didn't just, you know what I mean? Like, give me some credit. I'm pretty intelligent. Thank you very much. So then that was it. So then the lawyer was like, well, I've already told the judge that you've accepted it. And I was like, well, who told you to do that dumb shit? But fine, it is what it is. Like, I'm not going to continue moving with this lawsuit forward because everyone else's cases were a bit stronger than mine, like admittedly from the jump. And I honestly just didn't want to like continue to do this. At this point, I'd rather get the story out there and then let me move on from it. But like, again, if I to have to continue with the lawyer that I had or to find a new lawyer, and this shit was just like, it was just draining at that point, which is generally what I feel like these companies are betting on. 1, they bet on us not being litigious. But then 2, they're betting on the fact that like, will need the money quicker than we might need them. And again, I was in a privileged position where I didn't. And then third, that like this overtime will wear on you, and it does wear on you. Even though it's not like a daily active thing, it still weighs on you, particularly being named in this type of lawsuit, because you'd see like I would see people on LinkedIn like look at my profile, like random people off the blue. When I was interviewing, I was afraid of what they would say. When the article came out, I think my boss was like, "Oh my God, I saw this article," and I was like, "Yep." Like I was afraid of what she was going to do. Was she going to be upset about it? Was she just curious about it? Or is the company going to cut me loose because they were afraid of like blowback? And so for a whole year, I didn't actually put like my employer's name. I just said I was a mystery company because I just didn't want them. I wanted to protect them a little bit, but I was also trying to protect myself. And I just didn't know how they would react to it, right? So like this was the risk that I was going to take, that forever I'm going to be like that scarlet letter. And companies would never want to hire me because they'd be afraid that I would talk shit about them. But again, like you don't do toxic, narcissistic, abusive shit, then you don't have to worry about people talking about it. It's as simple as that. Like you don't do shit, I won't do shit. Don't start, there won't be none. It's as simple as that. Anyway, okay. So, I don't take it. And then this is what Melanated Insights, which I had already started previously, which was mostly just talking about being a Black PM, Black female PM, and like tips and tricks that I've learned. It kind of morphed into like more just like less about PM, product management specific stuff, and more just like being a Black person in tech. But I use that same publication, that same kind of platform that I had started building to kind of launch the series, which is clearly, this was the last video of it. But it's funny because that's maybe soon after I launched the first blog and video is when we got to like the latest updates. Not only did like Daylight close, which we knew that was going to happen, but they got acquired. And I put that in quotes because I know what was left of Daylight at that time, and there was nothing to fucking acquire. But nevertheless, this is a story that Rob can talk about, that Billy can talk about, that they had a successful exit, which is some bullshit. It's all fake news. It's like a Disney story at the end of the day, but like for horrible people. And he's actually here in Mexico City. I don't know if I told you all that. He's actually here in Mexico City and starting a tequila company. And I was like, another thing you have no experience in. Okay. Go off. But yeah, so that kind of brings me to the end. One thing I did forget about that I think is important is during its very beginning, right after layoffs, and I was telling you about the whole PTO thing. All the back and forth that was going on between, what's her real fucking name again? Stacy and the rest of us around PTO. Like they were trying not to pay out PTO. I told you like they had to pay mine out explicitly because Illinois way doing that shit, it was really clear. But they go in to the Notion page that we still had access to, I want to say, at the time before they like cut all our access. Which was clear that there was no explicit policy, which is what a lot of states needed in order for you to not pay out. So like you had to explicitly say that you would not pay out any accrued PTO on termination, and it had to be used like during your employment, or else if you didn't have that explicit language, then you would have to pay it out. And so they tried to change the Notion page as if like it doesn't come with automatic audit tracking of like who changed shit and when. Again, are you dumb or are you dumb? Like it just like, and it's so funny because it's like you didn't have to do any of this nefarious shit. Like you just didn't have to be evil. You could have done the right thing and it would have been over with, right? Like you could have run your company into the ground like a normal human being, but no, like we had to force that shit to happen and like strung out your business out there in the streets, like, and hopefully you're forever branded as a horrible person, because you are a horrible person. And I hope after all the shit that I've been shared, like you've all come to that same conclusion as well. But yeah, so they try and change it and then tell us like, oh no, this has always been this way. And then they try to blame it on JustWorks, which was the PEO. I think it's called like people something something tool. And we even called JustWorks and spoke to like their service, and they were like, no, we didn't have an update. But I think Billy was like, yeah, JustWorks had an update and they removed all this language that should have been in. And so like when I say that liars lie, these fuckers lie, and like they do it just like breathing air. And like again, and it's so unnecessary. Like you can just say that you fucked up, you didn't have this thing, and just pay the people the fucking money. Because like if they would have paid people the PTO on top of maybe a little extra, then like again, we wouldn't have to go through any of this shit. But anyway, here we are. So that is the end. We've come to the conclusion. I'll have to say, like, I'm happy that it's over. Like this part's over, because you know having to relive it has been not great. There's been times where I've been very depressed. Of like trying to even figure out the words to write in the blogs. But again, pushing through for the greater good. So I hope this like lives on and helps the people that it's meant to help. But at the end of my blog, I say some things around like, I have been considering blogging on behalf of people that can't do it themselves or are afraid to do it themselves. So if it's interest, like let me know. And I've also like thrown out this idea of kind of starting like a business aimed at VCs and LPs, the limited partners that invest in these VC funds. Because at the end of the day, like this is all a business. And so like even the very beginning, like it was always very confusing to me of like how an investor could back Daylight when I'm like, these people are wasting your money. Yes, you're going into this with the idea that most of your investments will not work and only 1 in 10 will even have a return of any kind. But what if that didn't have to be the case, right? You're in the business to make money. The LPs are in the business to make fucking money. So like, if you could understand that you're investing in a shitty person who happens to be charismatic and narcissistic and can sell you the dream, but the people that they're working for is like, yeah, he's stealing money and running this shit in the ground. I'm not saying Rob stole money because I don't know anything, but I'm just saying. Like, wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you want to be like, okay, let me remove this toxic leader, put somebody in place that can really like actually give this company, this idea, this business a chance, instead of just like letting them waste it. Because like I can tell you, I told you about Rob and Daylight, but like there's a couple of other narcissistic leaders that have wasted a shit ton of money as well, from like really well-meaning people to everyday people, from celebrities, from like all. I don't know if I may, depending on my mood, I may tell that story too. But anyway, so yeah, so if you're an LP, if you're a VC who's like interested in really understanding the real story, like I'm throwing around that idea too of, I don't know, call it Detective Brittany, put on my Nancy Drew hat. Anyway, thank you for rocking with me throughout this. Again, please share it with people in your network. I just really want to get the eyes on it because you never know when someone might need something like this. But I feel like it's better for us to have it than not. So thank you. Till next time. Bye.